Love-hate pass catchers. Great accountability from Dallas Goedert.
1,000%, right? You know what I mean? And let's be clear. Like, Dallas Goedert drinks free here at the happy hour bar. He drinks free, and I'll tell you why. Because who among us hasn't started ourselves and lost our own fantasy game because we were getting a 0 in our own lineup? That would happen if I started myself. So I appreciate that, Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert and all fantasy managers that are 0-1 after week 1, but looking for a better performance, you guys drink free, led by Mr. Goedert, who should have a monster game tonight for the Philadelphia Eagles as they take on Minnesota.
Yeah, it feels like after the goose egg, there'll be a big bounce back. You can kind of just.
I just think the entire Eagles team, it'll be really interesting though, because it's so weird because the Vikings are 0-1 and the Eagles are 1-0, but it sort of feels different. Feels like the Eagles are more desperate, if that makes any sense.
I think that we'll learn more about the Eagles from tonight's game. I think we kind of know what the Vikings are. They're a kind of 500-ish type of team, but the Eagles...
That got lucky last year in every close game.
Yes. And they're a regression team.
And it flipped already in week 1
Correct.
against the Bucs. So if the Eagles' offense doesn't look good tonight, then I think alarm bells start to just ring in the background a little bit because they look completely off kilter against the Pats. I think that's probably just the product of the Pats having an awesome defense, but there'll be no excuses if they don't light up the Vikings.
Let's get into the love list for the pass catchers here. This is headlined by Calvin Ridley, who his return was announced in a loud way. I mean, he had 11 targets in this game. He looked great catching the ball from Trevor Lawrence here, Barry. Calvin Ridley, there was doubt in his return, but he lived up to every bit of hype he got all summer in this offense.
And then some, right? I mean, just a massive target share. He got 50% of the team's red zone targets as well. Overall, a 34% target share. Like, Trevor Lawrence was looking for him early and often. I expect it to be the same against the Chiefs, where the over-under for this game, 51, is the highest of week 2. We expect a ton of points to be scored between the Jags and the Chiefs. Since the start of last season, only one team in the NFL has allowed more touchdowns to opposing wide receivers than the Kansas City Chiefs. So Calvin Ridley is a top 7 play for me this week.
Yep, certainly look the part. I'm going to make a prediction as well. I think if the Jags beat the Chiefs, Monday morning Trevor Lawrence will be the MVP favorite. He'll have Mahomes 0-2. He'll be 2-0 himself, and he's almost certainly going to have to play well to beat Mahomes in the process. Tua, who's right now the joint favorite, he's going to play the Pats defense, which isn't easy. So Trevor Lawrence, I think people are sleeping on him a little bit.
Barry, you always talk about how you could beat the Chiefs by attacking them in the slot. I'm curious to see if they push Calvin Ridley into the slot to kind of maximize their offense in this game.
I think they will, and I think you'll see more. Like, listen, if ever there was a week to use Christian Kirk, we talked about it on yesterday's show, that I do think like this is in a deeper league, in a 12-team, 3-wide receiver league, if you need some wide receiver help, for example, like Brandon Cooks. During the break, we got news that Brandon Cooks is dealing with an MCL. He's not going to practice today. His availability for Sunday's game against the Jets is in doubt. You didn't want to start Cooks against the Jets anyway, so that feels like anyone that isn't CeeDee Lamb, eights as I call him, you're sort of avoiding that situation. Kirk would be somebody that you could, if you're in a deep league where you were considering that.
Back to Thursday night football, Jay. Devontae Smith makes the love list. Listen, 10 targets in week 1. He looked great. We know this Eagles offense will really want to get in sync out of the gate on the short week. Devontae Smith against the Vikings defense, which doesn't look good at all. It didn't really look great last year either when they had a winning season. Should be a big night for him.
Yeah, I think so. And as much as uneven as the Eagles offense looked like, A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith, still 20 targets between them. They both get 7 receptions. A.J. Brown gets a bit more in terms of yardage, but Devontae Smith gets the touchdown. And yeah, he's in line for what looks like a monster season.
Since the start of last season, Vikings allowed the second most yards to wide receivers as well. I have him as a top 10 play this week.
All right, moving on, looking over at the Chargers offense, Keenan Allen goes up against that Titans secondary. On the show, we talk about all the time how you don't want to start a running back against the Titans front, but you do want to start your wide receivers against them, Barry.
Since the start of last year, Tennessee has not only allowed the second most yards and receptions, they've allowed the second most yards and receptions to the slot, which is obviously where Keenan Allen plays a lot as well. Since he returned in week 11 of last year, the only wide receiver with more receptions than Keenan Allen is Justin Jefferson, 29% target share in week number 1. It's a great matchup for him. I'm at wide receiver 14 in my current ranks. Full steam ahead. They're not going to be able to run the ball, especially with Eckler banged up. Like, this is going to be a full-blown, and hint, I expect Justin Herbert to have a big game here as well. A little foreshadowing for quarterback love.
Yeah, I think if you're going to overreact a little bit to week 1, the way to do it is with new offensive coordinators, just new schemes and seeing what they want to do. And it's a 1-week sample, but at the same time, Keenan Allen, those 9 targets, no one else on the team had more than 5.
All right, our next pass catcher here, Zach Ertz. It feels like everybody right now, Jay, might be looking for tight end help. We've just seen a ton of injuries at this position. We've also seen a lot of poor production or lack thereof production at this position. Zach Ertz goes against the Giants, who are still looking for their first point in this NFL season, by the way.
They are. A lot of people tried to bet on the Bengals to be the lowest scoring team of week 1 when the Joe Burrow calf injury happened. So it was a lot of money on that. The Bengals scored 3 points, and that bet still goes down because the Giants put up a goose egg. Zach Ertz had 10 targets in week 1, which seems insane, but he's similar to last season. Like, when he is on the field, he's still going to be a receiving weapon for a very limited team, Matthew.
That's correct. And not only a limited team, but honestly, the fact of the matter is that Josh Dobbs, just either because it's a comfort level thing or just, where this offense is leading him, he likes to dump off to the running back. He likes to dump off to the tight end as well. What's weird, though, is regardless of who quarterback is, whether it's been Dobbs or Colt McCoy or Kyler Murray, Zach Ertz has played 10 full games with Arizona since the beginning of last season. Remember, he got traded midseason to the Cardinals. His 10 full games with Arizona, he's averaging almost 8 targets a game. Cowboys tight ends had a 32% target share against the Giants last week as well. So I do think Zach Ertz, if you're desperate, I get it. It feels gross, but I think he's a top 12 play this week.
Yeah, it's a strange sentence, but can't really disagree just given the other options and how bad the Giants' defense looked.
Some others receiving votes here. Zay Flowers, who had 10 targets, and 5 of them were screens week 1. Todd Monken is dying to get Zay Flowers the ball. DJ Moore, Puka Nacua, one of the hottest names from the waiver wire this week. Nico Collins, of course, now catching passes from C.J. Stroud. Sam Laporta, who had a really solid debut of the opener of this season on the Lions. And then Dalton Kincaid, who also was a nice little outlet check down option. Hey, soft hands there, Barry, for the Bills.
Yeah, and a nice outlet, as you say. Since the start of last season, Vegas allowing the third highest catch rate to tight ends. Kincaid played 80% of the offensive snaps in week 1. We like the Bills to bounce back in a big way here. And I'll just also mention Sam Laporta, who I know it was somewhat quiet in the box score, but I think what was encouraging here, 83% of the offensive snaps in week number 1. Seahawks, by the way, allowed the second most yards to tight ends in week number 1. They've actually allowed the most yards to tight ends since the start of last year. This is an area where you can attack Seattle as well. So I do think Laporta is a viable tight end 2 this week. I have it tight end 13. And the only one but also might raise eyebrows there is Puka Nacua being on there. I get it that he was so awesome in week 1, and you're like, yeah, but he's playing San Francisco this week. Very quietly last week, the Niners allowed 19 receptions to wide receivers in week number 1. Now, when they got in close, they shut it down, but my expectation here is that McVay finds ways to scheme him open, and I think they're just going to, because they'll have no other choice, they will force targets to Puka Nacua, which means no worries.
Doesn't mean no worries, but that's fine. How much do you believe in Puka Nacua, Connor? Like, how, in terms of rookie wide receivers, Zay Flowers, Jordan Addison, JSN, Puka Nacua, where does he rank?
I just want to say this, that if you don't believe, that's when the magic stops.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
That's what I tell my kids.
I mean,
as long as you believe, the magic happens.
He had 15 targets.
I believe.
Thank you.
I believe in the play caller. By the way, Matthew,
seriousness. No, go ahead. You answer for real.
Matthew Stafford looked phenomenal.
Looked great.
Everything with Stafford is that timing and accuracy, and that Puka Nacua sometimes wasn't even really open, and the ball just got there from Stafford. Mm-hmm. So when you combine what he has around him plus opportunity, like if Cooper Kupp comes off the short-term IR, I would really, all of a sudden, really take a step back and be like, this is Cooper Kupp's offense, as anyone would. I don't know how much confidence I have in that, so fire up Puka Nacua. I'm more confident in him to keep this going than Tutu Atwell, and they both had huge week 1s.
Yeah, I wonder if he can sustain value, though, when Kupp comes back, because I think the team is going to be throwing a lot, and Kupp is just one guy, and we've seen what Robert Woods did in the offense, what Odell Beckham did in the offense. So I think that he might be real. I believe, Matthew.
Which I appreciate. Thank you. That's how the magic happens. The other thing here is that, more importantly, whether you believe or not, Jay, you know who does believe is that Sean McVay.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And this is something that isn't like just new to week 1. This is something we talked about a little bit in the preseason. They really like him in LA. The question was how much would he get on the field, and then once we knew Cooper Kupp was likely to miss week 1, we talked about, hey, pick up Puka Nacua. And then once it came out that, oh no, he's going on IR and he's going to miss 4 games, we're like, watch Puka Nacua be involved because they like him a lot there in LA. He's had a very strong camp. And then after his performance in week 1, that only solidifies it. We always talk about this, right? Fantasy success comes from talent and opportunity. Cooper Kupp's injury allowed Puka Nacua's talent to get the opportunity. They don't have a lot else there in that passing game. Like, again, Atwell had a nice game and Van Jefferson's there, but weirdly, I do think Puka Nacua, which I'm almost positive means no worries.
We need to verify that with Blake, but we'll let it stand for the moment. I think you raised the biggest point, Connor, which is that Matthew Stafford looked kind of like a guy who won the Super Bowl 18 months ago.
Legit, like top 6 quarterback is how he
was
played
magnificent.
week 1, just on the tape. And then one more I want to double down on, Barry, is Sam Laporta. I didn't think Seattle could rush the passer at all week 1. If you're telling me they have any shot to do that against that Lions offensive line, I say no. Jared Goff will have a picnic in the pocket. That looks great for their pass catchers, and it looks great for a guy that's always on the field in Sam Laporta. So let's go to the hate list pass catchers.
Yep.
And this one breaks my heart at the top, but I understand. It's Garrett Wilson. Zach Wilson gets fed to that Cowboys pass rush. They have great – Stephon Gilmore looks great. They have great cornerback play. Garrett Wilson, Barry, unfortunately, he's on the top of the hate list right now after massive expectations.
I am rooting so hard, legitimately, I am rooting so hard for Zach Wilson. I hope that kid crushes. I hope that kid shoves it in everyone's face that has been making fun of him for the past year. I am rooting so hard for Zach Wilson and the Jets. I really hope they make a great run here. But even if you include last week, when Garrett Wilson had to simultaneously create offensive pass interference with one arm and then juggle the ball with another hand to bring that in for a touchdown. Even if you include that, which at the moment is that's the bar to clear for best catch of the year. Even if you include that, in the 10 games that Garrett Wilson has played with Zach Wilson as the starter, again, including last week, he's averaged 9.2 fantasy points per game. Single-digit fantasy points. He averages under 4 receptions and under 50 receiving yards in those games. He's had under 45 receiving yards in 7 of 10. 1 total touchdown in those 10 games. We saw it, and it had to be like a catch for the ages to make that a touchdown. Yeah. And now, even with all that, it's also, oh, by the way, they're playing the Cowboys, which literally might be the 85 Bears.
Is that bad? Yeah.
I mean,
here's the catch right here.
In week number 1, Dallas allowed 41 yards to opposing wide receivers. In a game in which they were killing them, 41 yards. I mean, watch that catch. For those of you watching on Peacock or the NFL and NBC YouTube channel that are watching this, that you can see the footage here, what Garrett Wilson has to do, literally he's pushing off with his left arm and holding White off to the side. Look at this. And then he, with the back of his hand, pushes it up, volleyballs it to himself, somehow comes down with it.
It's Tre'Davious White as well.
I mean, by the way.
It's not like some random guy.
No, some random fifth-string rookie. No, it's freaking Tre'Davious White that Garrett Wilson had to make a unbelievable catch. He had to make an Odell Beckham-esque catch. So I have Garrett Wilson outside. I think if you have him, you still have to start him, but I'm at wide receiver 22, which is the lowest I ever expected to rank Garrett Wilson this year.
Yeah, Sam Monson at PFF had a really good tweet where he said that if you're a quarterback and you're under pressure 45% of the time, that's like non-viable. You just can't compete in that atmosphere. Daniel Jones was under pressure 67% of his dropbacks, and it's not like the Jets have the Lions offensive line either. So Zach Wilson is going to be under siege. I think the only way that he's really going to survive this is if the defense is turning Dak Prescott over and putting him in positions to succeed. But I think it's going to be a tough day for both Wilsons.
Just run the ball.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, both guys. Again, I put Dalvin Cook on the hate list, but Dalvin Cook may make me look stupid for that call just based on volume. Dalvin Cook may average 2.5 yards per carry, but he gets 23 touches, easily. And it just and he falls into the end zone, and all of a sudden, So anyway, unfortunately, Garrett Wilson does make the hate list this week on the road at the Cowboys. But hey, I'm an equal opportunity hater.
Nobody can ever deny that of you.
I mean,
I'll give you that.
You got to admit.
I won't give you much, but I will give you that.
I appreciate that because even though he has future Hall of Famer Sam Howell throwing to him, Terry McLaurin, who's one of my favorite players in the NFL, makes this week's hate list. He's outside my top 25, just at wide receiver 27. First off, Patrick Surtain. That's just an unbelievably tough matchup. Since the start of last year, Broncos have allowed the second fewest yards to opposing wide receivers. And last week, McLaurin, I don't know if it was the turf toe, maybe it was maybe the Howell and Dotson have more of a connection here, but he had a 13.8% target share. That was 4th on the team. the fact of the matter is they just weren't looking his way. That's always been one of the hallmarks of McLaurin, is that no matter who was throwing to him, the passing offense went through him. But whether it's because of the turf toe or because of the emergence of Jahan Dotson or just Sam Howell's preferences or some combination thereof, that target share just doesn't seem like it's going to McLaurin. So again, kills me to say this, but he's outside my top 25 for the week.
Yep, brutal matchup against the Broncos, who, again, their defense goes under the radar because that team hasn't had any success, but that is an elite defense. And Surtain is, I think, along with Sauce Gardner, perhaps the best corner in the league.
They play some of the ugliest games in the NFL.
Every game is 17-16.
Yes, exactly.
And they lose 80% of the time.
Yep. Our last one here on the hate list for pass catchers is Dalton Schultz, who gets the Colts this week. And Barry, this is somebody who now sits outside your top 15 tight ends for week number 2.
8%. This dude was targeted 8% of his routes in week number 1. He's one of four tight ends. He's one of only 4 tight ends in week 1 to play over 80% of the snaps and have a target share below 10%.
A lot of cardio.
He was out there. He couldn't get open. They weren't looking for him. Texans ran 3 plays in the red zone last week. 3 plays, and now they're against Indianapolis. And while the Colts defense isn't awesome, the interior, the middle of that field, at least is somewhere that I think they are better than. It's hard for me to trust Dalton Schultz. There's no upside. Like, it's not like Dalton Schultz is like super athletic. Like the pro Dalton Schultz argument is volume. Oh, well, he's going to get a ton of work, right? Because he's all they have. Well, not so much, because clearly C.J. Stroud, who did not look great in week 1, but when he was able to get the ball out, he was looking for Robert Woods. He was looking for Nico Collins. Give me the Luke Musgraves, Sam Laportas, Zach Ertz. Is like there's a zillion other tight ends out there that if you're looking in the tight end 2 range that I prefer to Dalton Schultz this week, who's merely my tight end 18.
Yep.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBC Sports and RotoWorld.com. Just want to thank you so much for watching what you just watched, or at least being too lazy to click out of it after the autoplay just kept it going. So either way, thank you so much for just letting it scroll by your screen. And now I'd like to ask you respectfully, please subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel for the latest NFL news, fantasy headlines from RotoWorld, and betting analysis from NBC Sports Edge.